Who are some of the worst romance scammers around? Let's find out, starting with number 4. It was the soup. A scammer posing as soap opera star Thorsten Kaye convinced Roxanne Doucette to poison her husband. Although the senior Massachusetts woman thought she was talking to Kaye, best known for his role in The Bold and the Beautiful, she was actually talking to a fraudster. But the problem wasn't as much that this was a fake Thorsten Kaye, but more of what he said to her. During one of their conversations, the fake Kaye had told Doucette that in order to be together, she needed to get rid of her husband, Paul. So, while Paul was out, Doucette got busy making him a special type of soup. So Doucette texted the scammer to let him know her plan, explaining that Paul would be hungry when he got back from wherever he was and would happily eat the soup, which he did, and complained of a sore stomach right after eating it. While the poison was making Paul feel sick, Doucette excitedly texts the scammer again to tell him her husband wasn't feeling well. She also suggested that maybe she could even collect life insurance, exciting the scammer, who wanted to know how soon the money would be available. Paul started to become extremely ill, and Doucette called 911 a few hours later. Paramedics rushed him to Neshoba Valley Medical Center, and the couple's daughter, Nicole Heath, met them there. For whatever reason, Heath was going through her mother's phone and became suspicious that she had something to do with Paul's sudden sickness. So she took a series of screenshots, which she shared with the police, while telling them that she was pretty sure her mom had poisoned her dad. Doucette denied the allegations and sobbed to reporters that the soup she gave Paul was just old, not poisoned, which is exactly what someone who poisoned soup would say. She also said she loved him and wasn't capable of what she's accused of. However, her text exchange with the person she thought was Kaye told a very different story. In December of 2023, a day after the alleged poisoning, law enforcement arraigned Doucette and released her on her own reconnaissance. Her husband's toxicology report came back negative, but the court ordered her to not contact Paul and to stay at least 100 yards away from him. The court also ordered a mental health evaluation and made her wear a GPS monitor, as she was only allowed to leave her home for doctor's appointments. Paul said the soup seemed off and had a bitter taste, so there was still reason to investigate. Doucette admitted to the police that she had told Paul she was going to go on a retreat, but then revealed that she had made the whole thing up. She also confessed to messaging the fake soap opera star. Apparently, she always wanted to meet a famous person, so everything she accused of makes sense, right? She insisted she was innocent in her police report. Don't they all? Adding that she was afraid to be alone and would never do anything to hurt her husband. Doucette also added that she loved her children and didn't want her daughter to think she was the reason Paul was in the hospital. Paul was allegedly under a lot of stress before the poisoning too, and had recently lost $8,000 in a scam. So the idea that he was already in a bad place isn't unfounded. Doucette was back in police custody days after she was released when she violated court orders to avoid contact with Paul by sending him a handwritten note, which she asked a neighbor to mail on her behalf. In the letter, the scorned wife begged her husband to drop the restraining order because she missed him so much. She received additional charges of resisting arrest and hitting an officer after police attempted to take Doucette's phone and tablet for evidence. Doucette fought back and kicked one of the officers to stop them from getting access to her things, like all other wives who didn't poison their husbands and would do anything to prove that. Of course, the cops won and eventually seized her belongings. This case is ongoing, and we'll have an update in the future, but from what we know so far, it's not looking good for Doucette. In an interview, she said that her son is a chef and her own mother was pretty talented and that she was a good cook herself, so she didn't want people thinking her cooking was dangerous. However, it is to die for. Yeah, it was an easy joke, but we had to. Number 3. Grinding out the money. Canadian fraudster Christian Richardson posed as a sugar daddy to scam vulnerable young men out of thousands of dollars, using Grindr to target young men in their 20s. Sugar daddies are usually older men who pay attractive young people for companionship. Richardson had pretended to be a wealthy businessman who would pay the men on his payroll. However, these paychecks were made out of rubber and bounced. Richardson also convinced the men to withdraw thousands of dollars from their accounts, which he just pocketed. The stolen money funded elaborate shopping sprees and fueled Richardson's gambling habit. Eventually, one of his victims told a local bank that he thought someone was scamming him. Police arrested Richardson, but later released him on bail. He was supposed to check into a recovery center while out on bail, but instead, he just went back to scamming. Richardson picked up a young man under the guise of a rich entrepreneur and tried to take him on a little trip. Luckily, law enforcement pulled him over midway through the journey. As the officer approached Richardson's vehicle, he hit the accelerator and sped off. Richardson then abandoned the car with the victim still inside and ran into the woods. When officers reached the vehicle and found the victim sitting, visibly shaken, in the passenger seat, authorities found Richardson in the early hours of the morning at a convenience store and arrested him again. And this wasn't Richardson's first brush with the law either. He had a decade-long criminal record of instances of fraud and similar offenses, surprising no one. Richardson addressed the court and stated that he was going to seek psychological counseling to address his issues. But given his rap sheet, multiple convictions for the exact same thing, and 13 of them earned him some time, it was pretty clear he wasn't learning any sort of lesson. Well, maybe he was learning something, but it definitely wasn't what the court wanted him to learn. Richardson said he wished he could rewind and undo the harm he caused his victims, and the court sentenced him to 15 months in prison. And you know that dude he picked up was like, "You're not gonna believe what happened on that date I was just on." Seriously, you're going on a first date, and before you even get to where you're going, the person gets in a chase with the police and then suddenly runs off into the woods? What do you even do after that? Just go home and watch TV? Do you have any crazy first date experiences? Let us know in the comments below. Number 2, cruel couple scammed elderly and vulnerable victims. Romance scammers Ibrahim Morrow and Rebecca Patrick scammed hundreds of thousands of dollars from vulnerable and elderly victims. Morrow and Patrick made fake profiles on dating websites, which they used to target their victims. The victims thought they were forming a romantic connection, but were actually speaking to one of the couple's fake accounts. An elderly Australian man had fallen in love with Rebecca and believed they were in a romantic relationship. Once she earned the man's trust, she asked him to send her some money to buy winter clothes. So he did, since that wasn't a big ask. But then she said she had a 78-kilogram holding of gold, which is worth about $5 million, stuck in Ghana and needed cash to release it, which had to have been kind of a weird conversation. Hey, can I borrow money for some winter clothes? Oh, and to release my $5 million of gold? Over a year, the victim sent $163,000 for Rebecca to get the gold, as well as other sums of cash and a new cell phone. But the elderly Australian wasn't the couple's only target. In 2016, another victim's new online partner convinced her to send them $22,700 as they were having issues with insurance. But the cash went straight to Morrow and Patrick. That same year, another woman thought she had formed a close relationship with a German widower who bought gold, silver, and diamonds on behalf of his clients. Morrow told the victim that he was abroad and had bought some precious stones, but had to pay taxes on the items before he could leave the country. He then said that if she didn't send him the money, then it meant she didn't care about him. Since she valued the relationship, she eventually wired him the funds. Although the victim thought the $3,150 was going to her German friend, she had unknowingly sent it to Patrick's bank account. Morrow and Patrick scammed multiple victims worldwide until the National Crime Agency investigated the couple's actions and found email evidence of their scam. Investigators uncovered the email account used to defraud several victims, which contained the financial evidence the scammers provided their targets. Morrow and Patrick were arrested for fraud and possessing criminal property. Morrow claimed he used the money to fund his clothing business in Ghana, and Patrick said she only gave Morrow access to her account so he could send cash to his family in Ghana. Patrick was sentenced to 18 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, and Morrow was sentenced to 5.5 years. Tragically, by the time the couple received their sentences, that first Australian victim had passed away. This sad story is a good time to remember to reach out to your elderly loved ones and check on them, since these scams are becoming more and more common. The only way to combat them is to not fall for them. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release to find out how this guy somehow saved money by cheating on his wife. Number 1, romanced and fleeced. A romance scammer stole $70,000 from real estate agent Christina LaBarbera after connecting on a dating app. LaBarbera met Rob Harris in April of 2023, and the two quickly formed a connection. Harris posed as a successful real estate agent, and it didn't take long for the couple to decide to move in together. So the New Jersey-based realtor headed to Florida to visit Harris and tour homes. But right before her flight, Harris sent her a frantic text saying the police pulled his car over and arrested him. Apparently, he had an outstanding warrant that he didn't know about stemming from a DV incident. Always a good thing to suddenly happen when you're about to board a plane to meet your new boyfriend he thought had been dropped. The money was to cover his alleged restitution, but LaBarbera later learned he used it to rent an Airbnb for his friend Matt. Then Harris reached out with another request for a $4,000 loan for a yacht. He promised that he would pay LaBarbera back with cash from his safe when she got to Florida. LaBarbera landed in Florida, excited to finally spend time with her new boyfriend. That's not what happened. When LaBarbera arrived, Harris immediately asked her to cover their $12,500 Airbnb and $1,300 in additional expenses, promising his mom would pay her back. And when she got stressed about the money, he sent her a screenshot of his bank statement, which had a balance of $720,000 to reassure her. And despite not paying her back, he told her he would put in an offer on both of their behalf on a $1.5 million condo. Since he seemed to have so much money in the bank, LaBarbera kept loaning him the cash. She sent him $50,000 in 1 month and paid $6,400 for Drake concert tickets in another. The new repayment plan was for Harris to pay her back when he visited her in New Jersey. So she waited at the airport with cupcakes, but he never showed up. Harris claimed an armed robber stole his wallet, but by then she figured out that he was a scammer. The accomplished real estate agent confronted him over text, but all he said was that he was sorry. He stole $70,000 from LaBarbera, who filed a complaint in civil court in early 2024. As of this video, Harris has yet to even acknowledge the case. And hey, we're not directly saying anything here, but we're casually pointing out that there are certain stereotypes associated with people who have Italian last names and live in New Jersey. Maybe scamming her wasn't a good idea, Rob. You might be getting a visit from Uncle Vinny and his associates. Lou pays at his favorite gentleman's club in town in Houston, and he's already downed quite a few drinks. He's already spent several hours with his favorite, let's call her a personal companion for the night. But he has a huge problem on his hands. You guessed it, it's because he's still married. Normally, the average cheater would think it's a big problem that they completely smell like whomever they're doing the cheating with. But this time, the smell isn't the big issue. Lou will just go to a gas station and rub some gasoline on himself before going home. That was his go-to move to cover any suspicious scents up by spilling gas on himself for the umpteenth time. The big problem now is that he found out his lady friend is pregnant. Lou Pei is a Chinese American who made a fortune from working with the now defunct energy company Enron Energy Services. Pei came to the United States when he was just 6 years old and his family settled in Maryland. As a child, he was considered a math prodigy, and he eventually earned a bachelor's and a master's degree from the University of Maryland. Pei soon started working at Enron and quickly rose through the ranks to become a high-ranking executive. In 1987, Lou Pei left the SEC to go and work for Enron. At the time, Enron was a small regional energy supplier. Pei quickly rose through the ranks at Enron and quickly became the CEO of a subsidiary called Enron Energy Services. At the time Pei became the CEO of that subsidiary, Enron was experiencing extraordinary growth. The company's business was booming, and things were going as well as they possibly could. Pei was a generally introverted and reclusive person. Very soon, he became known as the Invisible CEO because of his introverted personality. Despite being introverted, he had a penchant for living a lavish lifestyle, and that lifestyle would eventually come to symbolize not only Pei, but the executive management of Enron in its totality. In the end, Enron would face serious money problems, and a fine-tooth comb would be used to comb through all of Pei's excesses. Enron Energy Services, the subsidiary that Pei had control control over was Enron's retail unit. The business of the EES, as it was called, was to sell gas and power directly to homes at a market price. The company wanted to displace the pseudo-government entities that sold power to people and wanted to offer that same energy at a reduced price directly to customers. The company spent a lot of money on advertisements as it needed to convince people to pool their energy needs directly and purchase them from Enron. However, the implementation of this strategy was a monumental disaster. Within just 5 years, the company blew through $500 million in expenses without generating any significant income. Despite the failure of Enron, Lou Pei was having the time of his life. As a CEO of the company, he earned around $100 million in salary over 5 years. He also received a lot of valuable Enron stock that was worth hundreds of millions. So, what did Lou Pei do with all the money he was making from the Enron sinking ship? Well, the gentleman spent it at gentlemen's clubs, as was appropriate for a gentleman. Despite being a reclusive man, Pei came alive at night. He frequented his magical clubs as often as he could and was quite fascinated by the dancers in them. He was so fascinated by these clubs that he visited them every night and often had meetings in them. After the meetings, Pei would even treat the best performing salesmen to special encounters with the dancers in the club. Pei didn't just go to the clubs to watch dancers. He also made sure to spend lavishly on them. The dancers often didn't believe that Pei, a reclusive and introverted man, was such a powerful CEO. So he spent a lot of money on them to prove that he was indeed powerful and wealthy. Pei sometimes even took these dancers to his high-rise offices to show off, and the club parties would continue at Enron's offices late into the night. However, Pei had a wife, and wives typically don't like exotic dancers. So Pei didn't want his wife to find out he was spending time learning how to dance in special dance clubs. So he did what any reasonable and properly adjusted man would do. He went to gas stations and poured a little gasoline on himself before going home. He reasoned that this would get rid of the dancer's scent on him and that his wife wouldn't notice a thing. Judging by how often he frequented these clubs, we have one thought and one bit of advice. 1. Pei's wife must have thought he was really bad at putting gas in his car that had horrible gas mileage. And 2, pouring gas on yourself when potentially dealing with an angry woman isn't a good idea. Eventually, Pei's adventures at these clubs blossomed into a full-on affair, or magical romance, depending on your perspective, with a dancer named Melanie Fool. As luck would have it, Melanie Fool was also married and had 2 kids. Things got messier for Pei when Miss Fool got pregnant, and Mrs. Pei eventually found out about her husband's extracurricular activities. This time, he couldn't hide a baby bump with a gasoline scent. Mrs. Pei wasted no time suing for divorce, and Pei found himself in a precarious situation. And things were about to get even worse for Pei because why not? Around the same time Pei was dealing with his marital headaches, the higher-ups at Enron were discovering Enron Energy Services' massive failures and Pei's dancing expenses that were so vast the reports ended up on the desk of Enron boss Kenneth Lay. While Pei wasn't exactly fired from the company, Enron advised him that things wouldn't go on smoothly if he stayed on as CEO. So Pei made what must have been the hardest decision in his life. He left Enron. At the time, it must have felt like he was making a huge mistake, but time would prove that he'd made the best decision of his life. The divorce was hard on Pei. His wife had evidence that he cheated, and she was going to get every penny she could in the divorce settlement. The case was so expensive for Pei that he was forced to sell all of his Enron stock to pay his divorce settlement. Despite being in such a difficult situation, Pei was still quite lucky. At the time he was selling his Enron shares, they were around peak value. Enron's all-time stock share price value was about $90, and Pei managed to sell all of his stock for an average price of $72 apiece. At the end of the day, he made around $250 million from selling his shares. Pei paid his wife, Lana, a lump sum of tens of millions of dollars. He also had to forfeit his Houston mansion, a Houston condo, and a $3 million home in Hawaii as part of the settlement. Left with no wife, no job, and a pregnant mistress, Lou Pei felt like there was only one thing he could do. Marry the dancer carrying his baby and move to Colorado. By the time Pei was settling down in Colorado, a few things were happening over with his former employer. Pei had left Enron in June of 2001, but just 2 months later, the entire company was in trouble. The share price was tumbling down a hill, and in October, Enron had lost 2/3 of its value. At this point, the CEOs of Enron were all selling their shares while telling employees that every little thing was going to be okay. By November of that year, a single Enron share was worth just $1. By December of that year, the company had been exposed as a huge multinational professional fraud and was eventually filing for bankruptcy. If Paye had just delayed selling his stocks for a few months, he would have been left smelling like gasoline and dancers holding an empty bag of Enron shares, and could have possibly been facing criminal charges. When he got to Colorado, Paye bought the Taylor Ranch for $23 million. The ranch was so big that for a short while, Paye was the second largest landowner in Colorado. The ranch even had a mountain, and locals began calling it Mount Paye. Paye approached the purchase of the property very carefully. He didn't buy the land at once. Instead, he bought the entire ranch incrementally. He first purchased 23,800 acres of the southern third of the ranch for $6.9 million in cash. He also swapped real estate worth $2.6 million in Texas for it. 2 years later, he completed the purchase. This means that Paye had started purchasing the land even before his wife found out about his affair and he had to leave Enron. Unfortunately for Paye, the property was the subject of intense controversy. Before Paye bought it, it had been used communally by a community of ranchers. These ranchers expected the same unreserved access they'd had to the land, but Paye was having none of it. If the ranchers had all been exotic dancers, he probably would have considered it, but they weren't. Instead of giving them access, Paye decided to beef up security. He fenced out the ranchers better than every other previous owner and employed people to patrol his perimeter. Aside from that, he diligently pursued trespassing complaints in the courts, but the issues surrounding the land couldn't be easily disposed of. The ranch had been a part of a larger portion of land ceded to the United States after the Mexico-America War. Unfortunately, the legal rights surrounding the land as a common area nearby ranch owners were never spelled out. By 1960, the land was purchased by North Carolina lumber magnate Jack Taylor. The legal rights of surrounding ranchers to use the land were in legal obscurity by the time Taylor bought it. However, Taylor knew that the locals believed that they had some claim to the ranch. Unfortunately for the villagers, Taylor didn't believe in those rights and he tried to secure the ranch as his private domain. The efforts of Taylor to restrict the locals from the land triggered a feud that went on for decades. Taylor went to court several times, and the state and federal courts affirmed his right to secure his property. However, the local government wasn't too enthusiastic to enforce the court's judgments. In the end, it was the judgment of Taylor's neighbors that mattered the most. One night, in 1975, a bullet ripped through Taylor's roof and shattered his ankle. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he left Colorado soon after. He never returned to the ranch and ran operations there from North Carolina. The person who pulled the trigger was never caught. In the 1980s, Jack Taylor breathed his last breath, and his child, Zachary Taylor, yes, just like everyone's favorite president, permitted the locals' use of the land. However, Zachary only allowed limited access, and this negatively impacted the agrarian industry in the county. Losing access to pastures forced many local ranchers to either pack up or drastically reduce the number of their herds. In due time, Lou Paye started buying up the land little by little. For a while, Paye had Zachary Taylor had a legal dispute over the extent of logging that Zachary had allowed on the ranch before selling. However, the dispute was soon settled and Paye had everything he wanted. He had all of the ranch, his pregnant mistress, and a fortune in Enron stock sales in the bank. But instead of just settling into the ranch and keeping a low profile, Paye made some important moves. Zachary had hoped that Paye would offer the villagers even more access to the land, but that wasn't to be. When a policy consultant tried to talk to Paye and come up with a plan that would make it easier for villagers to access the ranch, she was rebuffed. It appeared that Paye was quite secretive about his plans for the ranch, and those plans did not involve access for villagers. Paye was so secretive that his team told the analyst not to even mention Lou Paye when discussing plans for the ranch with them. It was clear that Paye wanted to hide his involvement with the property. Paye's first course of action was to resurvey the land and ask neighbors to prove their boundaries, all at their own expense. In a few cases, some of the neighbors lost areas of the ranch that they'd had access to for generations. Paye also employed construction workers to build bigger fences that secured the ranch completely. Some of those fences are alleged to have cut right into the property of other people. Of course, the ranch management denied these claims and argued that they were simply maintaining old fences. Before long, the locals realized that Paye was an even worse owner than Jack Taylor. During Taylor's time, they could always find different ways to get on the property. However, Paye's fences made that practically impossible. There was no access, and that was the end of the story. There were also rumors that Paye wanted to divert water from major streams, impound them, and then sell them through a private water marketing company owned by Enron. He also planned to purchase water and land rights from his neighbors to complete his domination of the area. At the same time, the locals continually got into heated arguments with the ranch hands Paye employed. These arguments ranged from accusations that hunting activities were being stifled to arguments over hiking rights. While a lot of people accused Paye of being a bad neighbor, they also admitted that he'd started the work of restoring the forest and the ranch. Interestingly, Paye also showed some willingness to help the community. It was said that he had a soft spot for young people and seniors and was willing to help the community by donating to worthwhile programs. However, that was where his generosity stopped. He was never willing to discuss community access to his property. Despite selling his Enron stocks and becoming quite rich, Kaye was also never willing to give out raises, unless it was to exotic dancers. Anytime he gave a raise to an individual worker, he told the worker to not inform colleagues so they didn't all start clamoring for more money. All through Kaye's ownership of the land, there were lawsuits and potential for lawsuits from almost every angle. The case was constantly being dragged in front of the judge, and Kaye constantly had to defend his use of the land. But the fights didn't last forever. A year after leaving Enron, Kaye finally got tired of all the issues that came with owning the Taylor Ranch. He sold the ranch for almost $60 million, which was more than double what he'd bought it for. These days, Kaye is still married to the dancer he divorced his wife for, and they have 3 children. So, to all of you who are positive that that one dancer you saw last night was really into you, there's a chance. You just have to be a millionaire, because apparently that helps. Kaye might have sold his Colorado ranch, but he still operates ranches in Texas and Virginia. He's also very interested in Olympic dressage these days. And no, he's never had to face any serious consequences for his role in the Enron debacle. That's the sort of luck you get when you divorce your wife to marry a dancer you met at a club. Click here to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section what you'd rather own right now, stocks or crypto.